Hey, everybody. Welcome to An Attorney and an Accountant Walk Into a Bar. I'm John. I'm the attorney. My buddy here.
I'm Kent, and I'm the accountant.
And what are we going to talk about today, Kent?
Soy Kent y soy el contador.
AI wearables.
Did you just think
Next
did that
evolution.
just like say it in Spanish or something?
It sure did.
Cool. Let's get into it. Well, hey, everybody. So Kent's got himself a new gadget here, which is, what's the thing called, Kent?
It's called a Humane AI pin,
Ah, very
or
interesting.
human AI pin. The pronunciation is
Well, I
is
doubt
something
I
I'm
doubt
working
it's humane because AI is anything but humane. But tell us a little bit about what it does.
Feels like the next step towards full Skynet, and it I'm interested in it because it's the first gen of a standalone AI function. In previous conversations we've had, John, we talked about AI being having being supplemental to white collar jobs and how it might be integrated in our everyday life. And we even talked about like the old Iron Man has its own AI assistant, and this is a step in that direction. I say a step in that direction because let's be honest. I spent a little bit of time with this, and it's still quite rough, but it does cool things like automatic translation, which we showed right in the beginning. But it'll also do other cool things for professional services and the average Joe. So you're looking at your tax return and you say, "Hey, what's the best way to save taxes in 2024?" Let's see what it says.
Okay.
Finding tax saving tips. Some ways to save taxes in 2024 include seizing available deductions, making the most of higher saving incentives, putting savings to work, tax loss harvesting, and considering a Roth conversion.
Okay. Well, it's slightly banal, but tell me something.
Yeah,
Why couldn't I just pull my phone out and do that with Bard or anything else?
it's about simplicity of use. So the reason why Apple Watch really took off is because there's a lot of function in everyday use, and Apple Watch is now being able to detach itself from the iPhone and have separate functionality. Which I think the statistics 31% of individuals have wearables. I think 89% have smartphones.
Okay.
So as that starts to increase, I think we want to be attached to this brick, even though I call it a brick, and we still remember a time when the phones were an actual brick. But the idea is that it needs to be functional in someone's life. So a pin is a version of it. Apple has the Apple Vision Pros, and I truly believe that at some point it'll be as small as the glasses you have there on the table, and everything will be built into or integrated into our everyday life and allow us the power of what I would call infinite knowledge or infinite history to help us make better decisions. Now, there's pros and cons to that, which we'll definitely get into, but I find this really interesting because if you're an average Joe, a time where you may want to consult an accountant or even a lawyer, and I may ask it something like, "Hey, what is a 1031 exchange?" And I'll try to come up with something.
Finding 1031 exchange info. A 1031 exchange allows real estate investors to swap one investment property for another and defer capital gains taxes, but only if IRS rules are met.
Can you say that in Spanish?
Un intercambio 1031 permite a los inversores inmobiliarios intercambiar una propiedad de inversión por otra y diferir los impuestos sobre las ganancias de capital, pero solo si se cumplen las normas del IRS.
So in that context, let's say I am trying to give a explanation or a business explanation about a topic, and I may have a conversational understanding of a language. But as you and I both know, conversational understandings or implementation is not the same as business context or even legal professional context. One of the key potential uses is that I'm talking to a potential client or an individual of interest, and I need to explain a technical topic in their native language. Something like this, very key, could help. And this breaks down the barrier because it's real, well, I call it innocuous. If you had to break the phone out and you hold the phone to them and you hold the phone back and forth, it's less fluid in that conversation.
Yeah,
Right.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But why? Just out of curiosity, don't you think that would be better as a watch? Maybe just it'd be a little bulky as a watch, but
Well, the reason this
it
isn't,
seems like they could get it smaller.
they can, and I think that will happen. But the other thing that won't show up very well in camera is that there is in fact, a camera and a laser that points to a screen that projects onto my hand. And from that, you need the positioning of your watch is usually covered by your sleeve or something else. So it needs something that has open field of view.
Gotcha.
Another thing that it can do, but I'll show you that it doesn't do it so well. One of the beta testing components of it is describe what's in front of me.
To identify objects in front of you, use AI Pin's wide-angled optical sensors and the context system to capture information about the world around you. If this feature is not providing the expected results, please contact the support team for assistance.
Okay, that was lame.
Exactly. We talk about beta test, but the idea behind it, if you look at other videos that are doing a review or a more technical review of this item, I'm doing what's called a practical review, in my opinion, is that let's say it helps the vision impaired. And if someone holds on to this and they're saying, hey, what color is the sock that I'm holding? So there's an app out there called Be My Eyes. And in fact, a few days ago, my wife and I, we were sitting out having our coffees in the morning. She gets a call and she goes, hey, Kent, do you want to help a blind person? And I was like, yeah, sure. She clicks on it. And I kid you not, a wonderful old lady with, I want to say an Australian accent, comes on and says, hey, can you help me see where the spin cycle is? And she literally turns her phone around and we're looking at 6 in the morning, we're looking at somebody's washer dryer and we're telling her where to turn the knob for a spin cycle. And then when we're done, she goes, okay, thank you. And we hung up and that was it. The entire interaction was maybe 30 seconds long. But what it does is it goes down a phone tree of millions of users. And if you pick up, you're the first to pick up, you get immediately connected via video to their interface to see the world that they're in. Can you imagine instead of being on a phone that has a tool like this that's mounted, the forethought or the acceleration of helping the impaired around the world would be amazing. And it could also break down language barriers. Let's say somebody, I think that app predicates that I speak English or I am an English speaker, but maybe I'm not. So maybe this helps people translate into other languages. I think there's just so many capabilities or possibilities with tech like this in an evolution. Just like first movers or adopters of technology, we're going to go through, call it growing pains. Like Google Glass, we can all say is a flop. But it was the initial foray into integration of technology into our lives. And this is a better version, but it still has its issues.
Well, allow me to be the lawyer.
Okay.
And put the proverbial fly in the ointment, as it were.
I want to hear it.
So you mentioned something to me that immediately caught my attention.
Mm-hmm.
The camera. And I have to tell you, when you first put that on and said, hey, John, look at this, you know what my immediate visceral reaction was? Get the fuck away from me with that. You know why? Because it felt like a body cam.
Yeah.
It felt like you were spying on me. I felt like I was interacting with a cop. I got to tell you, I mean, when I interact with a police officer, and mind you, it's usually a positive context, at least has been so far. I see that camera staring at me. I'm like, I focus on that. I'm just looking at this goddamn camera, right? So it's off-putting to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, okay, so it's off-putting. You'll get used to it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you will. But here's the other issue. There's a lot of jurisdictions with varying laws about recording. And you can ask that, or it might even be, since it's monitoring visual things, arguably it's recording. And California, for instance, is a two-part. Well, let's talk about what the different laws are. So there's basically two structures. There's either one-party consent or two-party consent.
Okay.
And so it's generally discussed, well, is it a one-party or a two-party jurisdiction? Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is how many people, there's generally two parties to the conversation. And how many of those people do you need the consent of to record? Well, what does that mean? That's kind of weird. Well, what it means is, in California, which is a two-party state, if you're going to record something, you have to have both parties consent. Meaning, if I walk into a room where I have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and you're wearing this thing and it's recording, you could be violating my privacy if you don't get my permission to make that recording. Which I think that the big difference there between that, for instance, and iPhone is you're going to take your iPhone out and point it at me.
Sure.
And I'm going to say, well, what the fuck are you doing?
Right.
Or I might say, well, okay, that's fine. We're having fun. Go ahead and record me. So there's some consent, or at least there's some notice there, right? Where with this thing, it's like you're just wearing it all the time. Now, if you're out on the sidewalk, well, I have no reasonable expectation of privacy on the sidewalk.
Sure, exactly.
You walk into a store that's public, well, there's probably no reasonable expectation of privacy. Well, what if you walk into the changing room?
That's true.
And you're walking by the changing room, and you catch someone, with their clothes off or partially off. Well, that's a huge violation of privacy. That's actually viscerally, arguably bad. Right?
So what are the rules then around officers, for example, that have body cams that enter in other places? Are you saying
supposed to turn them off?
So
if they go into a place where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy, if they don't get permission, they're not supposed to be recording. But then on the other hand, if you're interacting with a police officer, you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Performance of their duty?
Because it's in performance of duty. So there's a gray area in that, and that's a lot, but it's a lot more obvious too.
Sure.
Where, if you're interacting with someone that's a uniformed police officer with a big badge and they got all their gear on, well, you kind of have
an
indication that there's, you're dealing with the government, right?
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with private individuals in a two-party state,
sure,
like California, arguably, if I walk into your office and you're wearing that thing, maybe you need my consent.
I mean,
and so that's a sticky issue. And then if you go to another state, say Idaho, that's a one-party state.
Sure.
And you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, it means only you need to consent to it.
Got it.
So you can record me surreptitiously, secretly. Surreptitiously.
No,
surreptitiously. That's how you say it.
Surreptitiously?
Surreptitiously.
Or is it surreptitiously?
I drink. Surreptitiously. Yeah, man. Too many drinks. But anyway, point being that how you interact with this technology is now varies depending on what state you're in, right?
So I understand what you're saying in terms of gray area. The thing that I think could be beneficial as a result of this is a concept that seems to be lost upon the current era that we're in, is behavioral accountability. When someone is recorded, as many times you see the beginning of an iPhone recording where they're just going apeshit, and all of a sudden they realize that this will be posed to the court of public opinion, be it social media, and their attitude changes. Because ultimately there's a saying that says...
Sometimes they just keep going.
Which
it's amazing.
Which helps them, which is awesome, and it helps dig their own grave.
Oh, yes,
to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
And then it goes to an old adage, and I don't know who said it. I would love to give attribution, but I don't know it. It says, if it can be destroyed by the truth, then so be it. And so in a lot of times when we're working in a society where people are two-faced, two-handed, are two-faced in their dealings with others, this creates behavioral accountability. I'm not saying it's correct for all contexts, right? And that's why the advent on the flip side of something called a Faraday bag. Are you familiar with those? These Faraday bags essentially look like an envelope filled with tinfoil, and they make them into backpacks and other sleeves, but essentially it blocks out all waves, Bluetooth, any signals. So if you want to go off-grid and you have your phone on, you slip it into this bag, you close it up, there's no signals going in or out. So you would take your electronics.
Put it over my head to get the voices out.
That's a whole different methodology.
Okay.
From there, I think it might involve electrodes. But in our case, I feel like in a modern society, there's a way to be connected and there's a way to disconnect, and that will now take conscious choice. I do believe that if everyone feels that people are watching, their behavior when it's put to the test of public opinion would be more moderate at times, that they would allow themselves to be unhinged. And I think calming down the almost the entitlement in our society of people deciding that it's okay to just get unhinged on others for inane things, I think it's just getting too far out there. And that's a little political, but not really. It's a behavioral.
I think that's a good point, that it could rein in people's behavior. And here's a counterpoint to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's also going to remove any kind of honesty, any kind of honest conversation, any kind of therapeutic conversation. Oftentimes, and I know everyone does this,
Mm-hmm.
you have your public face and you have your private face, right?
Mm-hmm.
So publicly, when I'm speaking in court, or I'm
Yeah.
speaking as John the attorney or talking to clients, I have a very particular demeanor where, when I'm with my boys, or I'm with, out with the guys and we're shooting, I might say things, I might curse, for instance, or I might say things that are vulgar, and other people would say things that are vulgar, and it's sort of joking, and it's sort of visceral, and it's a kind of a release to be able to do that when you're comfortable and among friends. And if everyone's recording all the time, well, what are we going to do? We're never going to be like that anymore. We're never going to be able to let our hair down and be calm. I mean, look at what happens with politicians if they say something off color, and they get beat over the head with it. And every single person on the planet knows they've said something like that.
Of course. But I think that also proves my counterpoint, which is that society has lost the concept of decorum, especially in public arenas. There is a time and a place to have various types of conversations, but it seems as much that everyone feels, or a lot of folks feel, that could happen anywhere, anytime. Let's just have it out in the middle of a Sizzlers for everyone else to enjoy.
If recording people puts that down, I think that's awesome.
Because I think that in the private context, people can make their own rules. So I would probably imagine, if you were to have guests in your home, you would say, hey, this is the Faraday mudroom. So when you first walk into our vestibule, take off your electronics, and then you're in our space. Wonderful. No more electronics going
That's
on.
an interesting rule. I never thought of doing that.
And then when
have a
you-
little box at the entrance. Say, okay, drop your phone in here, and your whatever that's called, and
AI.
your Apple Watch, and then they'll come into the house a little bit more, and then I'll have a little scanner.
There you go.
Scan them for signals.
It feels like you
Go,
want to do
okay,
that already.
He's clean.
I mean,
Come on up. We'll have a drink.
we know folks that work in the defense industry. So we take some of the defense companies. I have close friends that they're not allowed to bring their cell phone into work. So when they walk into the office, they have to lock it up, and they don't get to have it
Well,
while
sure.
in office.
If you're working with sensitive information, of course.
And so I think that implementation, we call it the respect for the information in that call it private time and place, could have a boundary made for offices, could be a boundary made for homes, right? Private residences where people come in, and it's not a time to create this behavioral accountability, public behavioral accountability. It becomes a time to go into deep work and being able to have honest conversations. But what it creates those boundaries of decorum. So people know that when they leave this space and they're out in public, they shouldn't act a fool anytime they want to, because we live in a society that should have some level of boundaries and respect for each other. And if you have bad things to say, that's fine. And here's the thing: it's not to say that you can't let someone have it, what in public or in the court of public opinion. It requires an individual to be more thoughtful about that comment, to be more articulate about what they're trying to say, and poignant about those comments. They can't just make it to a bunch of epithets and just profanity laden. You need to be very specific. Like, you are a moron because you did this action that indicated, a shallow depth of thought. And if you can explain it that way, then they'll be like, yeah, that guy is a moron.
Okay, good luck, Ken. I think the vast majority of the population does not have sufficient IQ to be that articulate about a comment that they make about someone that's upsetting them.
So I guess we just have to hold each other to a higher standard in society.
Oh, that would be good.
Maybe that's more
I
aspirational.
think that's a little aspirational.
But we're talking about aspirational items today anyways. I got a pin that translates into a few different languages. We can also ask it fun stuff like, who do you think is going to win the 2024 NBA Finals?
This should be interesting.
Predicting NBA Finals winner. The current favorites to win the 2024 NBA Finals are the Boston Celtics, with the Minnesota Timberwolves as the second choice according to the latest odds.
What's your source for that?
What's your source for that determination?
Real-time sports data from various sources, including Legal Sports Report, Fox Sports, and Sportsbook Review, was used to provide the current favorites for the 2024 NBA Finals.
How did she resolve any conflict between it?
How did you resolve any conflict between that suggestions?
Analyzing data. The determination was made based on real-time sports data from various sources, including Legal Sports Report, Fox Sports, and Sportsbook
I
Review.
feel like I'm in a deposition. Getting the BS answer from the deponent.
But remember, Generation 1, when we started this conversation, John, not so many months ago, AI had just hit the scene. And we were running, redo this paragraph through ChatGPT. And the open large language models have since exploded. The acceleration being we'll call it logarithmic in its pace. So if this is iteration 1, we don't even have access to data models that like Tesla is using for Optimus.
I have to wonder though, what data model is it using? 'Cause it's clearly it's going out to the internet, right? I mean, it's not internal to that device.
No, yeah, the data is coming through an internal SIM card that it's accessing data from. But we can ask, which large language model are you using?
Analyzing. The determination was made based on real-time sports data from various sources, including Legal
Generation
Sports
1.
Report,
Yeah,
Fox
I would
Sports,
say it's not
and Sportsbook.
ChatGPT 4.0.
Probably not. What AI language source is Humane Pin use?
Analyzing. Your AI pin uses the Cosmos operating system, which includes the AI bus framework for AI-driven experiences and a context system for understanding the context of user interactions. It does not specify a particular AI language source. If you need more information on the AI capabilities,
No, it's using its own model, which is maybe why it sucks.
So it's working on training its own model, but it's going to get curious data. Just like we think when we talk about electric cars and the autonomous automobile, I had this discussion where we feel Tesla is far and away superior to its competitors because it's got so much data. I think in Generation 1, it's probably smart to start out with their own AI system, because then with data, they'll be in a position of leverage or power when they're talking to a larger model. Says, let's combine our models together, versus being like, hey, I want to API, use the backend of your model only. But we also know that AI is not, in previous discussions, it's not perfect. It makes things up too, right? So one of the things I want to test on this
You know
is
what they call that?
ghosting,
Hallucinations.
hallucinations.
That's fascinating, isn't it? The AI's hallucinating.
I want to see the AI version of what I can give it to Trip. You know? the AI peyote, as they say, I would say. The AI peyote, as they say. But in our context for professional services, I really do see this as a collaboration tool. So if you're talking to, in our case, sometimes clients that English isn't their first language, and you're trying to explain a concept to somebody, and it would assist to allow them to have a translation. And it's something that's reliable. I'm not saying this is the key, but I'm saying a various iteration of this becomes a key to that communication barrier and or a document analyzation. So it's able to, not this version right now, spatially identify what's around. So let's say you had a document and you're looking at it and you say, and there's a young attorney that says, hey, what's the best way to redline this document? And it looks it over and it gives suggestions, bing, bang, boom, and it becomes a supplement and a tool for industry work. And on an accounting side, let's say we have people reviewing or looking at their 1040, their individual tax return per se, and they're looking at it, and it's Swahili to them, right? And they look at it and they say, you know what? I wonder what my AI pin says. Boop. Does this tax return look accurate? And there any other tax savings knowing what you know about me, because the AI pin now is that individual's personal assistant and has a repository of deep information about all the behaviors this individual takes on, and says, hey, yeah, you know what? I don't see a deduction for childcare. And you should get that because your income level allows you to do so, and that deduction, it should report something on your Schedule C, et cetera, because it combines what's going on in front contextually with its understanding of that person's behaviors and becomes an extremely helpful item in their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
Will your AI be able to testify against you in a court of law?
That is an excellent question. I would assume that it would be covered under that spousal privilege.
Really? You're married to your AI? You better marry it.
Yeah, that's right. If we can start marrying inanimate objects, it'll be something. But more so, I actually think it's because AI may be a part of you. It might be in the future. Legislation says AI is you. It's an extension of you, especially if it's a personal one.
Maybe in the future. I would bet you right now that the content of anything that your AI learns about you get played back right in front of a jury.
Of course, which then goes back to my original point of behavioral accountability, something that is...
Well, people will stop committing crimes now.
Stop
I
committing...
suppose when you force them to wear AI, maybe they'll stop committing crimes.
But here's the fun part. There's that weighing of the fact that you even made mention, your phone contains so much data. It's listening to us right this minute.
And they get used against people
and stealing all your information
all the time.
And you and I, knowing all this, we still choose to carry the phone.
Well, because
willingly.
we're not out committing crimes.
Yeah, but we're also willing to give up some level of privacy for the convenience of the technology. And so the idea is that once AI PIN has enough going for it, that the convenience of the technology will outweigh, and this is a bigger argument, but outweigh the loss of privacy.
Okay. So that's interesting, right? Because you're going to wear this thing. It's going to go around learning everything about you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like your phone knows where you go and knows what you do because you turn on the location services, by the way, which I have all turned off on my phone.
Okay.
And now you're thinking, I'm going through life and I say this and I do this and I think this way and I go to the meetings of the Society of Accountants. And then all of a sudden down the road it turns out that, well, you know, the government doesn't really like what you're doing. They really don't like what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like what that society that you went to is about because they're the wrong flavor of politics or their views are now unpopular. And now, all those things that you thought you were doing perfectly innocently and weren't criminal are now permanently recorded in your AI, and you now have no defense because it knows everything you said and everything that you did. And that sounds crazy, right? But think about how long ago it was that it was popular, in fact, absolutely required of politicians to be against gay marriage, for instance. Remember, it was Bill Clinton who signed the Defense Against Marriage Act.
That's right.
Remember, it was Hillary who supported him in that and was very proud of the fact that he had done that.
Yeah.
Now, it would be political suicide to be against gay marriage. In fact, I would submit that, you know, you might get canceled for being against gay marriage. And who knows?
And we see that.
What's next? So I think it's a very frightening proposition to have that much information about everything you say and everything you do and who you associate with and where you go, and to be, you know, known and recorded by an electronic device without some expectation of privacy.
So it's really interesting, and I agree with you. To that extent, nobody that I feel in society, including myself, is prepared for true 100%, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week transparency in our lives.
That's what you got on your chest right there, my friend.
I 100% agree. Which, in terms of creating boundaries with any new technology, and if you're the vanguard in this sense, you're always faced with that, right? With that decision where you say, when is it smart to have this on? When is it smart to then take something like this off and put it back in its little case for another time? And then also having parameters around your social network. And we talked about having Faraday vestibules, where someone rolls into your house. In order to interact with you, the choice has to be made to omit, they call it the court of public opinion.
And the people who are going to do that are paranoid weirdos like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the public is not going to think about this stuff. They're going to use it just like they do now. I guarantee you, everyone out there, well, I'm saying everyone, I'm going to guess 90% of the people out there are rolling around with Google Maps on their phone
Mm-hmm.
and all kinds of apps. I mean, it's not just Google. Google gets, they
Bad
get
rap.
the big bad rap because they're
Sure.
the big boy in the room. But, you go through your phone. I guarantee, go to your privacy settings sometimes. Look at location services. Look at all the apps that you've allowed access to location services. And you're going to wonder, well, why is it that WizBit 1.1, that I don't even remember why I put that app on my phone,
Mm-hmm.
has access to my location all the time? Why is that? You don't know. No one pays attention to that. Grab anyone's phone, open it up, and look at that stuff. And it's insane,
Yeah.
the amount of data that you're just throwing out there to everyone in the world. And why? Because we've become used to it. Now, if you had given someone an iPhone in, say, 1990, if there could have been such a thing, and told them all the things it would do,
100%
they would probably
spy
throw
tool.
it in the fireplace and go, my God, get that thing away from me. Satan, get thee away, right? But now we're so used to it, it's become so ubiquitous in our lives that everyone just accepts the violation of privacy. So I guarantee you that if those things work out the way that you expect that they will,
Yeah.
and they are adapted in some kind of mass context like an iPhone, and people are wearing them around, everything I just told you will come true. That there will be criminal prosecutions of people for their opinions and their behaviors and their associations with others.
I absolutely believe
That
you. I
is
think,
brought to you by AI.
and I think that's already at some level going on now between Facebook groups and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
What it does, it allows the intelligence community to do their job easier,
Oh, sure it does.
which is to follow and track, nefarious threats or even the average citizen. And I do think that it is a extreme caution to society that we need to find that balance, because the adoption of just technology that's supposed to improve our lives, which we just gave examples, or I gave examples of how it could really help us in professional context and personal context and communication and all those wonderful things, the cost of it, and the cost has always been with adoption of technology, is privacy and the expectation of privacy. Now, our country in America has the opportunity to have this discussion. There are other countries around the world that we know of that there's no expectation to begin with. And so this is wonderful because it just helps. They're not losing anything additional by adding this to their repertoire, because there was no expectation of privacy to begin with. Here, in the way we formed our country and the way we are now, our expectation is that we want to keep things that are private, private. And we're able to create that balance between our work personality, home personality, your personality that we have, a stage personality per se, and keep those things separate. This melds all those in together, and it creates some of the most private or potentially intimate moments, potentially public. I think that's a problem. I think that promoting a healthy interdependence on technology and being able to put it down, like for me, I tried to get into Kindles, for example. Never got into it. I couldn't do the electronic paging. I love a book and the feel of pages flipping through my hands, and I have a preference towards paper, right?
So you don't read books on Kindle, huh?
I do not. I cannot stand it.
I actually enjoy it.
See? And the Kindle's watching you.
Probably true.
So that healthy independence is a decision that's made on the individual level. I think what we have to resolve in society is that me purchasing this item, right, and utilizing this item has no context of whether you want to be captured or be a part of what I am accepting in terms of the lowering of privacy in my life. And so that is where the problem, I think, is going to lie. The decision-making process that I'm making on behalf of myself when it impacts another individual like yourself. And then also, if we talk about professional standards, if you have, call it the leg up, the adoption rate on this might be logarithmic because let's say this is at its 3rd gen, and me as a young attorney or accountant could come in, analyze returns, analyze contracts, get it redone, rewritten, and then submit this electronically to my computer and let AI rewrite it while the other person's reading and redlining and doing everything by hand. I can get through a ton more documents, which to potential partners at the firm make me more valuable, employee because of the chargeability and capacity amounts that far outstrip someone else that is, call it going old tech. And so that creates this conundrum as to whether they should adopt something like this or not. And I don't think the PIN itself is per se the final iteration. I think between that and the Apple Vision Pros, if they can get it down to the size of your glasses, and it's all integrated tech into the frames of what you're wearing, the adoption rate will skyrocket. And privacy will also be diminished.
Well, one of the things we didn't talk about that's kind of interesting, as you bring up this wearable AI stuff and just AI in general, is I think the vision of Isaac Asimov and iRobot.
Okay.
And you look at the movie, for instance, iRobot, and I think one of the things we didn't talk about or bring up is the fact that the AI was able to use all of this technology like the PIN. Well, they didn't have a PIN in that movie, but they had these scanners around the rooms and things like that. It enabled Vicky, the AI, to imprison the scientist that invented her. I forget his name.
Yeah.
And essentially, he had to kill himself and put out these breadcrumbs for Will Smith, whoever his character was, to follow in order to discover that it was really the AI that was the great evil that was going to take over the world and attempt to take over the world. So that could be a very interesting outcome or another potentially negative outcome. I'm sorry, I'm the negative guy on all this. But of having more and more wearable technology and having it more physically integrated with you personally is that, if you do end up with the, doomsday Matrix, Terminator, iRobot scenario of AI attempting to all our lives for various reasons.
Sure. Even to protect ourselves.
To protect ourselves, or because it sees us as the enemy, or because it sees us as smarter than, all the different, there's all sorts of scenarios on that, and everyone knows what they are. But having that technology, readily available would allow potentially AI to control or imprison people.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not all for unfettered access to my personal life given to AI for the sake of convenience. I think that healthy skepticism is truly important. It is just blurry in our society about where that boundary is and how an individual's different value set impacts another's. And the fact that you may have a much more stringent or strict boundary as to what you're willing to share and what you think should be shared across all platforms through AI or even video capture is different than others, right? Some people, as we know, make a living out of exposing their most intimate moments, and that's all they do, right?
Well, and don't get me wrong, me sitting here saying, don't adopt that and run away from it and live in a cave in the hills. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
Just any more than, I would love to sit there and say, you know what, I'm taking this iPhone and I'm throwing it in the trash, and I don't want any technology around me forever, and I'm just going to go, live in my ranch, where I have no technology. Well, I can't work anymore.
Yeah.
I couldn't be an attorney for anybody anymore. I would just be sitting in my ranch, which might be a great way to retire.
Sure.
But in terms of interacting and living in a modern society, who's going to be without an iPhone?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I mean, I looked in the street. Homeless people have iPhones.
And they do. So
They're sitting there in their tent on the sidewalk and they have a phone.
that's why we feel sorry for those with the Androids.
Right, exactly.
I think that's all we have for this installment of AI. I am absolutely sure we're going to be talking about this again, and who knows what we're going to talk about and come up with next. And I want to thank everyone out there that's listening to us so much for tuning in, listening to us talk about AI in its professional context. We would love to hear from you about your interaction with AI, any wearables, from having a Whoop or a Fitbit or your iPhone. We'd love to hear from you guys and where you think that AI is headed. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time.
See you guys next time.
See you guys next time.